So today, to talk about what steps you can take if your ex is refusing to follow court orders or agreements. Going to answer four main questions that come up around this particular area because narcissists and people of that ilk, they don't think a court order is for them. They are above the law. They make the rules. They don't have to abide by them, although they will expect you to abide by them. It's really important that we cover this and you know the reality of what that's going to look like and what you can do about it. The first thing is, how can you evidence and document these breaches or non-compliance? So the first thing is obviously just to save everything. Save whether it's through a text, whether it's a voicemail. If they're calling you, I do recommend putting a voice recorder on your phone so that calls are recorded, so that you've got all of that covered in case they make a false allegation against you on the call, but equally you've got them in their own words what they said and what their excuses are. Keep some sort of either running record. I use evidence tracker. That's what is available in the corporate toolkit or on its own in Master Your Evidence. Or you could just use the diary, but just make a record of the date, the time, and the specifics. If they send you a text at a specific time saying that kids are going to be coming because they're ill, or they're going to a party, or whatever it is, just keep all of it. And that's why evidence tracker is so useful, because it just creates this running record. And once you start to see it in chronological order, you can start to pull out these patterns. Now, what we also use within evidence tracker is this pattern of behavior so that we can look at, are these breaches following on from something? So what is the motivation for the breach? Have the kids had a really nice time with you? So that they're going to punish the children by saying you can't go next time. Obviously, they wouldn't say that as overtly as that, but it's looking for those patterns. Is it a retaliation? Have you said no to something because it's not in the court order, or you've got every right to say no, and so they're retaliating by stopping you from seeing the kids? Being able to evidence the pattern of these breaches is just as important as evidencing the breaches, and that's why I've included that in Master Your Evidence and Evidence Tracker. The second question is around what legal options are available to you to either enforce it or just to try and ensure compliance from your ex. And I've got to be honest, courts aren't great at this, certainly not early on in proceedings. There is no consequences for these breaches. It also depends on the reason that they give for the breach. So if, for example, they make an allegation, then it is technically classed as a breach. They will argue that it was about safeguarding, for example, or it might even involve the police who stop contact, or social services. They might triangulate someone else in to stop the contact. But ultimately, again, it's about these patterns of behavior, whether they are those smaller breaches of even being late for contact consistently taking the mick by turning up 15, 20, 30 minutes late, or asking to move the schedule all the time. You need to be able to know the tipping point whereby I'm going to have to take this back to court. I don't recommend you on the first breach jumping back to court, because you will get accused of being litigious. And the problem, in my advice, and obviously it's up to you and take legal advice on this, but is send them a message, if it's verbal, if it's on the phone, make sure you won't record it. You'll say, just to clarify, you are breaching the court order. You do not allow them to come to contact, or you send them late, or whatever it is. And that's it. Don't get into a back and forth. Don't try and argue a case. I'm going to come on to that in a minute. But ultimately, it's just about recording so that when you reach that tipping point, you can go back and say, look, this court order isn't working because they breached it on X amount of times. We need a different court order. We need more specifics on this. Enforcement orders are for persistent breaches, but as I say, courts aren't great. Courts aren't great at putting in consequences for this sort of thing. So be aware of the reality of that, and instead use it as part of your strategy for proving that pattern of behavior. I'm not saying don't bring them up and don't go through enforcement orders, but just be aware of the reality around it and instead use it as part of it and strategy. The next one is about those communication strategies. Try not to get into a back and forth argument about you're doing this, you're that. If they say that they're going to breach the order in whatever way, whether like they're telling you they're going to be late, they're telling you the kids can't come, they're telling you social services have told them to stop, don't over communicate with them. One, that's what they want because they can accuse you of harassment. They also get supply out of that, but it's not going to get you anywhere. It's literally wasted breath, wasted energy, because they're not going to move. They're not suddenly going to go, oh, yeah, you're right, I probably should. Send a clarifying message, however you're communicating, that says, just to confirm, you are breaching the order. And leave it at that. No admonishments, no criticism. Take the emotion out of it. Don't call them X, Y, and Z, because this will all get used against you, even though they originally started out creating the problem. Your response to that can equally get used as them saying they're aggressive, they're abusive, they're bullying, blah, blah, blah. So just be really mindful of that. Set clear boundaries around how you communicate. I don't recommend talking to them at all. I don't recommend having phone conversations with them or face-to-face conversations if you can help it, just because it puts you in a very vulnerable position. You can record everything, and I definitely do recommend that. Again, they will twist that and they will say, you're breaching their privacy, you're not being fair on the children in recording it. So where possible, make sure that you've got written records of all communication. So text, if you have to, I would recommend getting a cheap phone that's reserved just for them, and keep your phone just for nice messages that you have with your family and friends, and have a phone that's just for that. That also means that you can protect time. You can say, I'm only going to check it twice a week, or I'm only going to check it once a day. It protects your emotional boundaries. You could use a parenting app. Again, I would set the same boundaries that you're only going to look at certain times. If it's an emergency, again, I would maybe suggest putting in an emergency communication model. That's a different conversation. But ultimately, it's about protecting your boundaries around these breaches so that you're not falling into the trap of getting into a back and forth argument, which can get twisted and turned against you. And the final one, which is probably the one that most parents are worried about, is how do you protect your relationship with your children when your ex is constantly either stopping contact or messing about with it? Well, it's difficult because those actions undermine you as a parent. They subconsciously make the other parent look like the superior parent to the children. They learn that that parent is the one who makes the rules. That parent is the one who is the dominant parent. And so they can then start to use that in their behavior, talking down to you, because they've watched you be belittled by this other person. And so you can then be on the brunt of them feeling like, actually, we're more important than you. This is the role reversal that we see, and that inverted hierarchy of them suddenly becoming elevated above you. So the best ways to kind of prevent all of that is to not get involved in the conflict, create a bubble. This is where parallel parenting, it creates that bubble where you're not drawing them into conflict. It's also very counterintuitive, but I do recommend not defending yourself to the children. So if the children come to you and say, why didn't we see you on Friday? Mummy said or daddy said it was your fault, which happens all the time. The natural thing is to go, actually, it was their fault. They did this, they did that. That's not what they're asking for you. They're not asking for the truth. They're not asking what happened. What they're saying is, we missed you, and is everything okay? So meet them with their emotional needs and just say something along the lines of, Mummy and I have different views on what happened, and we're going to try and sort that out. That's it. You don't need to blame or draw them into that, because that creates part of the Lloyd's conflict and the confusion for them. It must have been really hard for you to have heard that, to think that I didn't want to see you. I'm really sorry for that. How did it feel? And instead focus on their emotional need at that moment in time. If they're angry with you and you've done nothing wrong, again, you don't need to defend yourself. Just give them the time. Let them be angry. Anger is just a communication, but they're feeling a little bit afraid. They're not quite sure what's going on. They're confused. Let them feel those things and just be the one who is regulating their own emotions. So the final point on this is to get emotional support on this. Seek therapy. Use the I Am Safe tool within corporate toolkit, which helps you to manage your emotional responses so that you're not getting drawn into this fight or flight response with your own children. What your ex is using these things for is to create a disconnect between you, is to create arguments, friction, sorry, between the two of you. Use it to create connection. Meet them where they're at. If they're angry, let them be angry. Let them, just as long as you keep them safe, don't jump in and be all like, no, I need to defend myself. This isn't fair. You can't treat me like that. Obviously, at some point, you're going to need to set some boundaries, but understand that they're communicating emotionally with you. Keep them safe while they're doing that. And then when they're calm, then you can talk to them about it. But the key to all of that is you staying calm and regulated. So those are my top tips for dealing with an ex who is continuously breaching court orders. If you do need further help, do click the link in the description to our court prep toolkit, which contains Master Your Evidence and the I Am Safe course as well to help you to regulate your emotions. Take care, everyone.